I thought we'd do a fun little video today. Let's talk about how Fox bodies have changed from, say, the 90s to today. Fox bodies have always been modified to taste, but there's a big difference between the way they're modified now and the way they've been modified, say, back in the 90s, early 2000s, and honestly, even the late 80s. People were already modifying these cars. So if you're new to the Fox body game, we're not going to go through the do's and don'ts. I've already done a video like that. So if you're new to the Fox body game, or maybe you're a little younger and you never really saw how these cars were modified, what I'm going to do, search the internet for a few pictures to show you guys along the way. And we're going to talk about the difference between the way the owners do the cars now and the way they did them back then. Now, first off, you've always got the guys that leave them stock. Now, this is not a real Cobra, this is a Cobra clone, but it has like factory style wheels on it and pretty much a factory appearance. So you've always had the guy that wanted to keep his car completely stock. Guys, it's been that way since the beginning. There was always people that wanted to leave these things stock, and that's the way they intended on leaving them. Back in the day, that's pretty much all I did to my car was lower it, blue mica. I had a 93 GT back in the day, and all I did was just lower it, put some fake Celine stripes down the side of it, and that was about it. But one of the popular mods back in the day was Cobra R wheels, which you never see anymore. There's a couple guys that still run them, but for the most part, nobody runs Cobra R wheels. Now, back then, you didn't have a lot of wheel options. I mean, you could put like hammers or like the prime style wheels, you know. The wheels that we know today, there weren't really any of those type wheels back then, unless, of course, it was like a stock wheel. Now, you always had the 93 Cobra wheels. Now, those didn't start getting reproduced until later on. Those weren't even available as an aftermarket option from what I remember in the 90s. The Cobra R wheel really started the aftermarket wheel trend for these cars, because after that, shortly, you know, we had the Celine wheel. You could find wheels, but you had to do a 5-low conversion. It's not like it is today where we have a decent selection of wheels for 4-low Fox bodies. So it was really hard to set yourself apart. So one of the things that a lot of people did was customize their car with paint. And I don't mean just picking a color, right? Well, not one color anyway. I mean painting stripes and ghost flames and all sorts of stuff all over their car, and just to set themselves apart, because like I said, you didn't really have a lot of wheel options. Oh yeah, you also had fatties and skinnies. We call them drag wheels. Like Weld pretty much was about the only company out there back in the day. And you could either get the Weld 5 stars, and you could get the bullet hole style drag lights. You basically had 3 looks back in the day. It was pretty much a Cobra R wheel, drag setup, which I absolutely love, or it was just factory, obviously. So people back in the day would spend a lot of money to send their car off and get this custom wild paint job down it. I actually had a car that was painted up the same way. Now, I didn't paint it that way. I traded for it that way, but I'll show you guys a picture of that right now. So as you can see, I had one of those colorful painted up cars. So that was just a popular thing. Also, the Celine wing was really popular. So everybody was putting Celine wings on their car. So nowadays you don't see the wild paint jobs as much. It's funny because some of the trends have stayed, but a lot of the trends have just completely gone away. Also, a huge trend back in the day was louvers. So people put louvers on the back of the windows, especially with the 4-eyed cars. That was a really popular mod. I'll see if I can find a picture for you guys now. I'm not against any of these things, to be completely honest with you. I like the louvers. I like the Celine wing. And every once in a while, you'll see it to this day. You know, you'll still see the louvers and all, and it's kind of cool as like a retro kind of look. I'm not against them. What else? Well, big cowl hoods. We did huge cowl hoods back in the day, and that's pretty much what everybody did. The funny thing is, I love cowl hoods, and all of a sudden the internet tells me that I'm not supposed to like them anymore. Guys, I still like cowl hoods on these cars. They look great. Love them, love them. Now, I'm not too big on like a 4-inch cowl hood on one of these cars, but I do like an aftermarket hood, believe it or not. So that was a really popular thing, you know? I mean, guys, you got to think, back in the day, there weren't as many modifications as there are now. If you wanted something custom, it was either a candy apple red or brandy wine, or either you had to do some funky stuff paint-wise as far as like stripes and stuff like that. So it's a little different for us today now. People would put the chrome wheel well moldings right there on. Something I've noticed, a lot of people are really kind of going back to that car, to the Minister Society car, with the green and the gray and the Daytons, you know, just slammed on it. But right up here, you would see GTS solid covers. So if you wanted to tint your headlights, really the only option you had back in the day was to buy these covers. So you'd slide these covers over your headlights and make it look like essentially a one-piece headlight. So that's probably where the whole one-piece headlight thing started. Was, hell, everybody back in the day used to like the covers. It made them look like a one-piece headlight. So that must be what everybody wants. Also, back in the day, you'd see touches of neon. Like on this car, you might see some pink, you might see some bright blue. You would see stuff like people would customize these cars with all sorts of little zigzag like little stripes and decals and stuff. It was crazy. You'd see so much of that stuff back in the day. As far as the interior goes, you saw a lot of seat covers. There's a lot of seat covers. You'd see aftermarket shift knobs like 8 balls and cue balls and stuff like that down there. You'd have a big, huge monster tack over there, which some people still run those. In the late 90s, I started noticing all the pillar pods. So they started popping up everywhere. And when I mean popping up everywhere, I mean literally, guys. They would just have them stacked up. Gauges in your vents over there. Well, I guess I really can't say anything. If there was a hole to fill, they would fill it with gauges back in the day. These gauges on these cars aren't the most accurate in the world, so I can kind of understand it. But we don't really do as much of that anymore as we used to. And systems. Obviously systems. People would have 215s in the back of their trunk, 218s, and just walled off. If you guys do not know, the hatchback Mustang is one of the best sounding cars. If you want to put some bass in something, these are the cars to do it with. Man, these things were the shit back in the day. Everybody had a hatchback of some sort, whether it be a Camaro or whether it be a Mustang with 12s or 15s or something in it. So it was an awesome time to live. You could ride around anywhere and hear somebody bumping an old school 5.0 or old IROC or something like that. It was awesome. Awesome time to be alive. But we also didn't have the problems that we have with these cars today yet. So back then you didn't have to put money into your Fox body to make, all of your trim look good. All that stuff was still good on these cars. You didn't have to worry about suspension. Pretty much the only thing you had to do was pick up one of these cars and start modifying, start customizing. You didn't have to worry about getting them roadworthy. They were pretty much roadworthy back then. So during the 90s and the early 2000s, how did you modify your car? What did you do? Well, underdrive pulleys were a huge thing. So people would replace their stock pulleys with underdrive pulleys. You gain about 5 horsepower or so, something like that. I think they rated them at like 15 or so horsepower. So that was a big deal back then. Occasionally you'd see guys with headers. You really didn't see 24-pound injectors. I mean, guys, you saw basic stuff. People would take out the thermostat right here and they would buy another thermostat and set it down in an ice bucket or something like that to trick the car to give it more timing and more fuel. You didn't see people putting Explorer intakes and all on. I'm sure there's some people that did that. Gears were always a thing. People would put 355s, 373s in these cars pretty much from day one. That was something that you were going to be doing. So that's not really changed a lot. What has changed a lot is the way we make our power nowadays. It's completely different. As you can see, we got an On3 turbo kit. This type setup, really, you didn't see that a lot in the 90s. I mean, there were people running turbos, but it just was not very common at all. One of the first things, though, that I do remember were the trick flow heads. So the trick flow street heat high port heads were some of the first heads I ever remember seeing. Now those came out in the 90s, if I'm not mistaken, and they were a really good head. People were searching for more horsepower. Turbos weren't really that big of a thing. The superchargers were. You saw a lot of superchargers. A lot of these cars ran around with 327, 355 gears, 373s, with a Pro Charger, a Vortec, with a set of heads and a B-cam. Guys, those style combinations still work to this day. Those cars back in the day were making over 400 horsepower. That's crazy. Back in the 90s, people were doing it. So the whole point of this video was to really educate some of the younger guys that maybe weren't around back in the day when these cars were being modified. I really just wanted an excuse to show you guys some really cool pictures from the late 80s and 90s and stuff like that, to be completely honest with you. I love those pictures. I love the way those cars look. It's like a nostalgic thing for me. I grew up going down to Panama City Beach when these cars ruled the roost. It was the Fox body, it was the IROCs, it was the Grand Nationals. You saw Fox bodies everywhere.
Oh! That looks good over there. Hey, wait, low! Yeah. Hey, what you got? Get on! Oh, man, that's that cold shit last night. Hey, get on at one time.
It's just funny how our tastes change in some areas, but not completely change in other areas. That's the thing that always gets me with these things. I'm back to basically a completely stock style looking car, and I like that. We probably will put a hood. I'm actually working on a hood right now. It's back behind the fence. You guys can't see it. We're working on a custom cowl hood. More on that later. I hate that a lot of you missed the 90s and the 2000s, and even before that, the 80s. People were modifying these cars in the 80s too, but to be honest with you, I don't remember a lot of that. I was born in 1978, so I can't really speak on that. I was pretty much a kid, right? But I can tell you about the 90s and on. I just think it's really cool that these cars are still popular, that you guys still enjoy them. that the world still enjoys the Fox body. They're not going to go anywhere, guys. They're going to be here for a while. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up. Like I said, I hope you enjoyed it. It was basically just an excuse for me to show you some really cool cars from the 80s and 90s. We'll catch you guys in the next video. And as always, thanks for watching.
Hey, what you got? Get on it. Oh, man, that's that car.